Kev with Chrome Diggers Guide Service. I operate here in Central Oregon at pretty much all the Central Oregon lakes, and also down in the Columbia at doing salmon, sturgeon, walleye down there too. So, and before we dive into it too, throughout the show, I'm going to have Mark. He's going to hand out some tickets too, because at the end of the show, we're going to give these manual downriggers away. So, let's jump into it here. So we're going to be talking about lake trout and bull trout. These are pretty much your lakes that you're going to target them around here anyways. How many of you guys use Navionics? Yeah, a few. If you don't, I recommend getting it. Navionics is when you're going to a new lake or trying to figure out a lake for the first time, or if it's been a while since you've been to the lake, it's a great tool to refine new spots. These fish move around. When I talk to people about them, you know, I'll talk about flats and drop-offs. This is Odell Lake. This is kind of places I would target. So if I hadn't been up there, or if this is open, those are going to be points of interest for me. And the reason, you know, those are points of interest is, what do these fish feed on? I mean, kokanee, right? So kokanee will generally school up early seasons. You'll find big balls of them, and then what's generally under them? Mackinaw or bull trout. So I generally find that they're ambush predators. If it's early season, they'll be sitting right under the schools. If it's, you know, late season, they're generally going to be in deeper, cooler water as the water temperatures warm up. And so they'll slide up early mornings. That's generally when you will target them. Let's see here. This is another spot. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Odell Lake and recognize this spot. But anyways, kind of want to talk about the steepness here, as far as if you're looking at a Navionics chart or, you know, any sonar chart. The closer your lines, the steeper that water is going to be. So again, when I'm looking for places, new places, or going out for the first time, I'm going to look for steep banks to flats, or here's like a shallow area that drops into a deep little hole. So as the water warms up, these fish are going to go back down, and they're going to lay on the bottom. You know, generally they'll feed and then they rest. They feed, they rest, right? They're just eating machines. I can't tell you how many times I've pulled these fish in and they're puking kokanee up in the boat. I mean, they just eat. All right. So currents and flats. It's another thing I think about, right? So Lake Billy Chinook, for example, it's a reservoir. Even though it's dammed, there's always current moving in it, right? Another, you know, thing these fish do, I don't know if people fish in the rivers or anything like that, but fish are always pointed up in current, right? They're always going to generally be faced in current. So again, when I'm looking for Billy Chinook, this is like where the Deschutes River comes in. This is the Crooked River. You know, here's a giant flat. Generally, we'll look at these high points here. Generally, we'll find a lot of kokanee in these flats. Again, you find the bait fish, you're going to find these fish. When I start my mornings off, usually, I will troll for the first time, unless I am confident I can go out and find a big school fish. Once I do find that big school fish, then I generally will switch over to jigging on them, right? Let's see here. We'll talk about a little time of the year too, because that does play a big part. So winter, December, January, February, this is what I consider like the start of the year, right? So if you're a Billy Chinook, it's open year-round. You have most of your spawners that go up the Metolius, and they're starting to come back. And I don't know if you guys have never fished there before. The Metolius is closed right there where the Metolius and the Deschutes meet before the dam. So you can't go up that arm, but you can still have a good season in there. You know, it'll really start to pick up in January, February. That's when those fish will start really coming back in. And then, you know, I think March 1st it just opened up. Now that arm's open up, and you'll find a lot of fish up there. Not that you can't find them everywhere in the river, But if you're looking for those big trophy size, you know, they're generally going to be up the Metolius or close to the dam. That's where I found them. Springtime, March, April, May. This is what I would consider kind of the best times to get out there. You know, most of them are done spawning now. Most of the fish are back into the lake itself from the rivers. Again, also, you know, at this point, Odell Lake is going to open up. Great time. I mean, opening day at Odell Lake is, if it's not iced up still and it's thawed out, it's a great time to get out there and jig. I mean, those kokanee balls will be schooled up, and I'll take people out there with kokanee gear and, you know, 3/4 ounce jigs, which is a lot of fun. You put a lot of kokanee in the boat, and then in turn, you're going to catch a lot of, you know, Mackinaw too, because they are just on the bottom of those schools just feeding. So you can just drop right through them. Summertime, still a good time to fish. I usually am not spending a lot of time at Lake Billy Chinook around this time. Unfortunately, well, not fortunately, but there is a lot of wakeboard boats there, right? So if you're trying to troll, you know, with your downrigger at 120 feet or 150 feet, you imagine you're hitting wakes doing this all day. I mean, it puts a lot of action on your stuff. But this is a great time, too, to do a lot of jigging or trolling right on the bottom of Odell Lake. So we'll get into that, too, here in a little bit. Fall. This is kind of when it starts to slow down at Billy Chinook. You will see the bull trout start to move up. You know, they're starting to go up the Metolius. It can still be a lot of fun. As far as when I'm in these months, I'm doing a lot different techniques. I'm usually running old spoons, and I'm usually trolling 3 miles an hour. I'm looking for, you know, I wouldn't say juvenile fish, but the ones that aren't necessarily going back up the river. So fun time to go out and actually see where these fish are staging and stuff like that. All right, so trolling and jigging. These are pretty much 2 tactics I use when I go out for these fish. You don't have to have downriggers. You can have, you know, lead balls, which is generally the simplest. Dipsy Divers, lead course, downriggers. I use all these techniques, and I use them throughout the year at different times, different water depths, you know, different weather conditions. So, a lot to it. We're going to talk about lead balls first, though. So if you've never done this before, most of you guys have been salmon fishing or have ever been salmon fishing or have salmon gear. This is the same setup, right? So nothing tricky about it. You're running a lead ball. I'll usually keep those 16-ounce lead balls in the boat. There is depth charts out there for lead, which is really handy. It'll tell you approximately how many feet to put out to target what depth. These fish generally do run deep. Not to say that I don't catch them on the surface, but we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Works both different scenarios, right? Lead's very versatile. Dive charts. The con I would put with this is that you have a heavy lead ball on your line, right? So now you're catching a big fish with heavy lead. So it kind of kills the fight, in my opinion. But, you know, again, if you're trying to get out there and just do this for the first time and try it out, which it is a lot of fun, this is probably one of the easiest ways to get into this. Dipsy Divers. I don't know if you guys have seen these before. This is I use a lot, right? So if I'm running my 4 downriggers out the back of the boat, and then I'm running maybe 2 Dipsy Divers off the side. If you've never seen these before, and I'll pass one around, they're pretty cool. They come in different size. Again, they have different depth charts. But they have like a 3-ounce weight underneath of them. And you can move this weight, which will not only pull your lures down to depth, but it'll pull it away from the boat. So now your boat has a wider underwater spread. One thing I do too, and I find that helps, is you can run them just like where you would place where your lead is and then your leader or flasher. Started doing this. Put some quick clips on there. Put your gear out about 10 feet, then put this on. So this is actually away from your gear, almost 10 feet. If you're out there by yourself, it's a little tricky because you get that fish in, 10 feet to the boat. Now you're trying to take this off your line, but these are pretty easy. Just flip them and it comes off the line. So those are pretty cool. And like I said, I use those a lot. They dive pretty deep and they're not as heavy. They have release clips on them. So as far as running like that one will be comparable to running like a 16 ounce lead, but that's only like I think it's a 3-ounce lead. So, does have the breakaway. They are directional. Cons, it still again adds weight to your line. So if you have inexperienced fishermen, you know, you don't want any slack with these fish. Just keep the line tight, no pumping action, anything like that. And again, you got to run generally a long bumper with them. So 6 feet, 7 feet. I mean, with that one, you can even set, you know, a 20-foot setback. So if you could pull it off while the fish is still away from your boat, you know, again, you can do that. Lead core. So I use lead core. I brought a lead core line setup. I like to use this early mornings, shallow water, right? So these fish, like say Odell, for example, they'll come up into the shallows, like really shallow, 20, 30, 40 feet I've caught them. And you put a lot of line out, you use colors. I don't know, have you guys ever used lead line before? So essentially it's lead in line, and each color is about 10 yards long. And, you know, depending on what weight you get, they'll dive X amount of feet for how many colors you have out. So on mine, I usually run a 3-color setup. So I'm running mostly, I don't know, 300 yards of braid backer. Then I have 3 colors, and then I'm running like 50 feet of mono in front of that. And then I'm attaching my leaders. So essentially what it does is it lets you fish a lot of different lines. You can fish your downrigger still close to your boat, and you can let these just be way long behind there. And they, you know, if they're standoffish, you know, which generally if you're in shallow water, they can be boat shy, right? They do make dive charts for this, depending on what kind of line weights you go with. So, and again, depends on where you're at, but I do use these at Billy too in open water, but not as much. So these are generally I'm running at Odell, and I'm generally running on my shallow banks early in the morning. This would probably be later, I don't know. Once the water temp warms up and the lake actually has created that thermocline, this is when I'll start pulling these rods out and start running in the shallower water. Again, cons, generally you need a dedicated reel to these because you got to put a ton of line on them, right? To get those 3 colors out there and away from the boat, you're going to put a lot of line out. And if you're running a 50-pound braid, it takes up some room on the spool. And then you're limited to depth. I mean, this is not a setup that I'm going to pull out if I'm going to be fishing 200 feet deep bottom, and it's just not going to get down there unless you're adding additional help to it. And then downriggers. So I run 4 of these. Pros of them is, you know, you hook your line directly to a clip on these, and you can send them down to a dedicated depth. So if I'm marking fish at 80 feet, I'm running one at, you know, 75 and 85, you know. You can really target in, or if I want to drag the bottom, that's another great technique, right? So you'll find these fish glued to the bottom. And earlier when I was talking about those points, as I come up on one of those points, I'll drop my downrigger down in the mud. I'll drop it to the bottom, slam the mud, and then pop it up real quick. And that just stirs them up. After their bite is off, you know, say that morning bite, and they've gone down, they hunker down, they're pretty stuck to the bottom. And I'll just pound the bottom real quick with the line. And that, you know, if I'm pulling like a quick fish behind it or anything like that, that thing's in the mud, right? That thing's just rattling back there and it's dragging through the mud. Do lose those every once in a while, but it is effective though, right? It stirs them up because, you know, once they've fed for the morning, they're smart. They've been around for a long time, right? They're not going to go out of their way generally to go eat something after they've ate for the morning. Anyways, downriggers, again, you can stack multiple lines on these. So, you know, if you had 2 downriggers, you can run 4 rods on them, right? You can stack clips on them. There is other videos out there. You guys can YouTube that about line stacking, but it's super easy. You know, essentially you send one rod down, you'll clip the line on 20 feet above, and you can send another rod. So now you're covering multiple parts of the water column with one downrigger. I mean, shoot, if as deep as you can run, I mean, you can run the 3 rods on there, or 4 rods. You can just stack them 10, 15, 20 feet apart. Cons, they are expensive. You know, if you're just trying to get in this for the first time, don't think you got to go buy the downrigger to go fish these fish. Again, you can use lead or Dipsies or other thing, but they are expensive. If you go in the electric route, generally you're going to have to wire it into your boat, which means extra batteries, extra, you know, stuff, which is nice about the manual, so you can throw them on any boat, and you just crank them up. And accessories, you got to buy lead balls, clips. You know, if you're a cable guy, you run cable. If you like running braid, you can run braid. All right, so jigging. Do a lot of vertical jigging, and I'll do a lot of dead drifting or dead sticking. Both techniques are good, and I'll use them at different points, you know, throughout the day too, especially Odell. I don't know if you all been to Odell. Wind gets pretty hairy at noon, which makes it fun out there. But there's some techniques you can do to prevent that. I've been out there when it's super windy, and those have been some of the best days I've had out there. And everybody leaves, and you know, you're battling the wind, but it's good fishing. So if nobody knows, vertical jigging, super simple. You know, I like for my jigging rods, I'm running like a heavy, fast rod with braid on it. I don't want any real bend more than that in the tip. I want to feel, especially when you're, you know, trying to target a fish that's 100 feet, 200 feet, you know, deep, and you want to be able to feel that and, you know, give it small presentation or small pops, essentially. And this is a great place to start if you've never done this too. This is very inexpensive. Most people have a bass rod. That's perfect for these. You know, bass rod with a bait caster.
What's your favorite color?
Pink and orange, surprisingly. And then actually running just a chrome with maybe some black dots on it. And I like running, if I'm in like, say, targeting 60 feet of water, I'm running like a 3/4 ounce. So very, very much a kokanee jig, you know, early season. And then as the year goes on, they start going deeper. I'll go all the way up to about a 2 ounce of that same style. And then, I mean, of course, I've used bonding baits and, you know, big, almost ocean style jigs, you know, 4 or 5 ounces when really deep. And I want to just set it on the bottom and pop in it off the bottom. So more or less, I'm using these in like suspended situations when I've found a big school of kokanee. Because I'll spend that morning trolling around, marking schools again, and then later in the day I'll make that transition where if it's not just red hot or I'm, you know, seeing a lot of fish that are suspended underneath those big schools, then I'm going to come back and just target right on those. And that's a big thing. When I'm targeting that school, I'll drop that jig right through the school, and that school will spread out, and you can kind of see the bigger fish on the bottom. I'm running like the Mega Live imaging, which has really changed how you look at how these fish are reacting and how they're reacting to different color lures and stuff like that, so you can really see what they want for that day, which is really cool. And then I'll move to the outside. Once they've kind of come back together and move around, then I'll come out to the outside. And I might be 10 feet outside that school. And I'll drop it down past the school, you know, 10, 15 feet, and just kind of bring it up to the school, stop. Back down 10, 15 feet, bring it up to the school, stop. And that'll usually get a lot to go right there. Can be a lot of fun, especially, like I said, early season when they're all that bait schooled up. A lot of fun. Cons, weather can be hard to vertical jig, right? So if you get up at Odell and the wind picks up, your boat's going to be moving, your gear and your line's going to be lifting, you're not going to be effectively jigging. Not to say you can't catch fish doing that if you drift through another school or anything like that, but you won't be targeting what you're looking at. I did put a Minn Kota on there. You guys all run Minn Kotas, or a lot of you. They're a very effective tool, especially if you don't know what they are. They can GPS spot lock on one position. And so it's like anchoring in deep water. So pretty cool. drifting, dead sticking. So this is what I do a lot when it does get windy. If I have the Minn Kota down, I will usually face it in the wind, and I'll almost be back bouncing or back trolling with the wind. That way the front of the boat's kind of blocking some of the wind. But if I'm not running the Minn Kota, I'll use like a windsock or a ocean anchor. They're just like a giant nylon bag that's big on one side, small on the other side. You know, they go in the water and they slow your drag down. A bucket works good too, you know, 5-gallon bucket tied to a rope. But essentially, this is great when, you know, I have my dual rod. If I'm out by myself, I'll do a herring rig, just like if I was trolling at the Columbia for a salmon, and I'm running 4 5-ounce lead, and I'm probably running 4 feet leader, and I'm just setting that down at a specific depth. And then I'll have a big, heavy jig that's probably 4 or 5 ounces just to combat me moving in the wind. And it's just simple as that. It's just sending it right down, and that little bit of movement that wind's giving you is kind of just giving that fish almost a flutter. You're not trolling it, you're just moving with the wind. And it can be very effective. It's just a way to fish in the wind if you don't want to troll or you don't want to try battling the wind. Use the wind to help you fish. So.
Are you saying you set it up like a herring?
Yeah.
Rig?
Yep. So essentially, let me see on this rod here. I'll run like a triple hook setup, and my top hook slides. So essentially, I'll hook that a whole head, not a cut plug or anything. I'll back this up and get this one in the tail there, and then this one just kind of free floating behind it. And then at my leader point, I won't have this on there, that's for trolling, but at my leader point, I would have like a 5 ounces of lead. You know, you can run like trolling leads, or if you have lead balls, or
But no Dodger.
No Dodger, just bait, right? And I mean, even in the right conditions at Lake Billy Chinook, I've been up by the dam and the wind gets blowing, and you can just get the boat sideways and get that perfect drift going. Put all the rods on one side of the boat and you're just slow drifting. I mean, you're probably moving ½ mile an hour, so very slow. So we'll talk about a little bit of tackle and gear I like to use for these fish. Trolling lures, I mean, there's a lot out there. These are mainly the things I'll use. Mag lips and quick fish, I'm using a lot when I go to Odell and I'm fishing the bottom. I'm running these in the mud. So if I'm running downriggers and I'm looking at 120 feet of water, and if I give this, say, like a 20, 30-foot setback, these plugs are going to naturally dive themselves too. So I'm running my downrigger 5 feet off the bottom. Say that plug's going to dive 7 feet. It's in the mud. And it's, you know, it's effectively working for me. And again, these fish, after that morning bite has happened, they are bottom. I don't know if you've ever pulled one in, you look at their fins, they're white and stuff. That's just a characteristic of them being stuck to the bottom and constantly being at the bottom. Spinfish. Spinfish, Brad's cut plugs. I use a lot of these too. I'll use these for suspended fish mostly, and if I'm running like flashers and stuff. So it's kind of what I use. You guys want to look at some of that? But, you know, and I'm running anywhere from 1.5, 1.6 to about 2 miles an hour. And I'm running like short bust triangle flashers. Again, this is a lot of salmon gear. So, you know, if you're already invested into salmon, the same stuff is going to work for these fish. So, like these. Also use big dodgers, like 10-inch dodgers, and don't be afraid to pull out the old Ford fenders. So I've had days where a ton of boats are out there fishing the same thing, and you put one thing different on it, and that just can be the ticket sometimes, you know, just being a little bit different. Spoons, I run these. Oh, yep.
What size quick fish do you use?
It depends. You know, they say match the hatch, right, or match the kokanee size. I like the size 3, the 3-inch ones. I'll go up 3 5s, 4s. I even run 5-inch ones sometimes. And And that'll a lot of dictate too, like I said, on speed I want to troll, how much action. If I think, you know, I might start with something big and I might downsize as the day goes on. So if I'm out there, I might run, say, a green label herring on one rig. I might run a Brad's quick fish on one, or a Brad's cut plug, which I'm running. Generally, I think they're just the large size or whatever Brad's makes. And then usually I'll run 2 spin fish up top. I think the 3.0s, the 3.5s. And it's just a variation of different stuff. And then that, you know, I'll let the fish tell me, right? So if I pick one up doing that, I might switch one more over to it of a different color maybe. But generally I start the morning with a bunch of different sizes. Let them kind of dictate. If I've been out there and I've been kokanee fishing and I know that that time of year, okay, it's late in the year, these kokanee are big now, right? You know, they're at Billy Schnuck, for example, they're generally on the smaller side. Odell, they're a little bit on the bigger side, but yeah, which gets into like herring, you know, that's probably as close a bait as you can get to what looks like what they're eating. I also run anchovies sometimes, you know, just switch it up, but herring's 90% of the time of what I'm going to run out there as far as bait goes.
You load your cut plugs with tuna?
I do, but I've had days where I just don't, and I just use like a Procure gel. I like the bloody tuna anise or anise, whatever that mix, and I'll just put a little bit of gel in there and just run them. I've had days where I just won't even put anything on them. You know, if the sun's up, the temperature's good, I feel good, and you know they hit right off the bat. Yeah, they're not like coming up sniffing them. I don't think. I mean, yes, it's proven that, you know, scent's in the water and they can smell it from a long ways away, but if they're there to eat and you're trolling through these schools and the feeders are up at the schools and they see something coming through that's wounded that pulled right through the school, they're going to probably hit it. And then spoons, like I was saying, I'll usually run these like really early season, right off the bat. And the reason for it is I troll 3 miles an hour when I'm running those. So with all these lures, you got to keep in mind too that you're trolling different speeds with each one of them, right? So I'm not going to run my spoons with my Brads or my bait. You know, you kind of want to run things that are like speeds, right? So if I'm running spoons at 3, I have everything at spoons and I'm running 3. Great for checking to see where fish are at, right? So you're covering a lot of water. You're generally going to catch, not to say I haven't caught big fish on these, but you're catching on the smaller scale. Again, I'm running early, so these fish haven't quite come all the way back into these lakes yet. So just another way to get out there. Get a troll fast and see a lot of water. Cover a lot of fish. Make sure, again, if you're not running avionics, you know, or if you are, when you mark those fish, mark it on that map every time you see it, right? So by the end of the day, I've got like 7 points of kokanee schools that I got, and then I'm going to turn around, pull my trolling stuff up, give everybody jigging rods, and we're going to go sit on top of these fish and try to catch those jigging. So I'm doing 2 parts a day, all right? You got trolling in the morning, jigging in the afternoon. If trolling's hot, I'll continue just to troll. I mean, but you can put a lot of fish in the boat very fast jigging, you know, and it's a lot of fun when you're right there on them, no weight except for your jig. Leader lengths, again, every one of these is going to have a different leader length. These I'll run, if I'm running no flasher in front of them, I'm generally running like a 5-foot leader from like a 6 bead chain, or if I'm running lead, so I have 5 feet. The closer that lead gets to that lure, the more I feel like it deadens the action of that lure. Same thing like with the Brads and the spinfish. I generally will start the morning at 36 inches. And if the bite is not as fast as I'm trying, I might, you know, elongate it. I might pull the flasher out of the mix completely. Don't be afraid to run naked sometimes. I mean by naked, I mean just don't have a flasher or a attractant. Just run the lure by itself. I can't tell you how many times that, you know, I have so much gear in the water that you feel like you're pushing the fish away, right? And pull that one flasher off that one thing, and that one just gets slammed. And it's just maybe because they're stood off by it. As fishing, I feel in these lakes is becoming more and more popular. You're getting more and more boats out there, and more and more stuff they're seeing.
How heavy is a leader?
So I generally run, like I said, a 50-pound main. I'm running generally anywhere from a 20 to 30-pound leader. And if I'm running my flashers, I'll run a 40-pound bumper in between those. That way, at Odell, if I'm hooking up to stuff, I at least like to get half my flasher back, right? Especially when these flashers, they're not cheap. I end up making a lot of mine. Just buy some Lexane from the store there and trace a couple and cut them out, heat them up, and bend them. And it works good. Then you can buy a tape on eBay or whatever and make your flashers however you want. When you're trolling the bottom again, you do lose gear. So, and then boat speed, kind of talked about that with the spoons at 3, bait and cut plugs and spinfish. I'm generally running together at the same, which is anywhere from that 1.5 to 1.9, 2 miles an hour, somewhere in there. I'll kind of let the fish dictate. I might start the morning at 1.7, and if I'm turning and I'm hitting fish on the outside of the boat on my turn, I'm gonna bump up when I'm gonna start trolling 1.8 and see what happens. And so you kind of just work there and work up or down with your speed and see, let the fish tell you what speed they like. All right, trolling flashers. Kind of talked about this a little bit. Again, I use these a lot. I use the big Dodgers. I don't know if you guys have kokanee fish, but these are very popular for kokanee, just in a very big size, 10 inches. I've tried them. I have never caught one on a 360.
You're kidding.
Nope. I've tried them out there plenty of times, and it's just, I don't know if it's just too much with that full rotation going on. Not to say again, you can't go catch one on it, but
I got 101 gold trout last year with a
Dodger.
With the Dodger.
Yep.
With a 360.
Yep. Okay.
Brad's cut plug.
Brad's cut plug. Yep. Again, salmon gear, it works perfectly for these fish. I've never had that great of a success with them. 360s and Dodgers is generally what I'm going to, and if I want to throw something different, it's forward fender or no flasher.
Awesome.
And again, it all depends too, how many people you have in your boat, how many rods you're running out there. Again, if you're seeing fish at 80 and you got all your gear down at 80 and all your stuff's all tight and you have all these flashers going in one area, it's like an ambulance going through there, right? So. Terminal tackle, bead chains, chain swivels, right? If you're trolling, I have multiples on these, right? I'm probably running like 3 or 4. Running one down. Again, I run these little fins up here, line twist. When you're trolling fast, slow, you're turning, you catch a weed, you start, messing up and getting line twists in there, it's not very much fun. So the more swivels I had in the way, I probably feel, like I said, running 3 or 4 if I'm running flashers and stuff like that. They're inexpensive and they save you a lot of headaches when you're out there. Other than that, I use, like, if I'm running lead or whatever, I like the VIP line locks just because they snap. Well, they don't snap, but they sit right on the end of that chain swivel there, and they again help restrict that transferring of that spinning up your main line and giving you a bunch of line twists, which is no fun. All right, jig and tackle. Very straightforward. Again, these are probably my #1 go-to. It's just like a lead, kokanee size jig. I've caught a lot, and then I use like a bigger size too, like the 2-ounce ones. So, and again, my weight is dictated on my depth. Not to say that I won't run like a 3/4 ounce really deep, but if I am, jigging, at like 150 feet, pretty deep, and I'm popping the bottom or right above the bottom, I want a little heavier weight just to get down there, just to feel it a little bit better. You know, sometimes you can feel like that 3/4 ounce, even with little to no wind, will get blown out, and you'll be out of your target zone. Bondi baits, they're huge. I didn't bring any. I didn't bring any, but they're big. You know, you can get them in like 3, 4, 5 ounces. I'll use those at like Odell for really big Mackinaw. Yeah, and then jigs. I use these a lot too. Cultus and Crescent. The Mackinaw are a little bit on the smaller side at Crescent there. And these little tube jigs there, I mean, in a white or a clear, you can go have a fun time out there, just catching and releasing them, but you can catch a lot of them really fast. They are a little bit on the smaller side there. And then dual lock snaps. I will run dual locks when I'm running these, just if I'm going through colors, and so I can switch out between my colors fast. When I run these, I am tying directly to them. And the reason for is when I tie directly to that versus having a snap, if you have a snap, that jig's going to sit like this. Where if you're tied directly to that eye, that presentation when you're down there, just kind of popping it off the bottom, it's going to have the presentation that it's designed to have, which is, you know, horizontal in the water. And if you have that snap swivel on there, you won't get that. And then rods and reels, right? Ton of different stuff out there. I mean, you can go on for days buying tackle, but if you don't have a setup and you want to get a setup, this is a pretty inexpensive setup, and I would recommend this one. This is the Akuma SST. It's like heavy, it's 9 foot. This can do a little bit of everything. You know, you can jig with it. It is on the long side for me for jigging, but again, you can jig with it. You can run lead with it. You could run it off a downrigger. So it's kind of like, I will run these just for lead generally, but you can, if you're looking for one rod to kind of do a little bit of everything we just talked about, that's kind of what I'll go to. If I'm running downriggers, these are like specific to downriggers. I'm running like a medium and moderate, and I like glass rods. I really crank those things down just because you're running so deep. Any little help that I can get of line pickup, you know, by the time I get to the back of the boat to grab it out, because these fish are pulling them out of the clips, I'll take. And then for jigging, again, I'm running like a heavy and a fast action. So reels, line counters. I love line counters. You know, if you have somebody on the boat and you're looking at a specific depth, you can just say, hey, put that line counter out to 50, jig at 40. Repeatability if you're trolling, right? Just your setbacks, being able to spread your gear out. I might run one bottom downrigger at 40 feet out, and then the downrigger to the right, which will be, say, higher in the water column, that one might be 80 feet out. So spreading my gear out in the water column so not everything, again, is in one section of the water. You know, you got an ambulance coming through an area, they're going to scatter. Again, though, some days I do that. I do crowd the water, and it does, you know, it draws them in. But generally, I'm spread out. Different parts of the water column, different depths back, anywhere from 40 feet setbacks to 80 feet setbacks. Yeah. Questions? We got any questions? Yeah.
If you were going to eat Mackinaw, what would be the best way to fix them?
I've ate them, and when I do eat them, I'll smoke them. They are a fattier, oilier fish. Generally, I don't keep the really, really big ones. So, like if I'm at Billy Chinook, I'm trying to keep the ones, if you know they do want to be kept, we'll keep them around between 24 and 26. Anything bigger than that, you usually put them back in the water. You know, just let them do their thing, and they're yeah, you know. And we're out there, we'll catch some kokanee where we're at it too. So some, you know, the clients are going home with some good eating fish too, because if you haven't ate kokanee, they're delicious. And then same thing kind of with Mackinaw. I mean, once they get those huge guts, and yeah, you might like it. Some people like it.
They make good pictures.
They make good pictures, and just let them keep swimming. Yep. Also, real quick too, if Mark's gonna go around, he's gonna hand out. Oh, he's got it. Oh, look at you. That's cool. Yeah, right.
I got a question.
Sure.
Last 3 times I've been out at Billy Chinook,
Okay.
I have caught 0 bull trout.
Okay.
Does water clarity
Yes.
and moon have
Yep.
something to do with it?
I feel like it does. I've been out there on days where they've opened the dam. So Billy Chinook recently, I've read an article that they're doing some dam maintenance, right? So the water level's been very low down there, which at that point, it was pretty clear, I think, when they were letting out. They just slowed it back down because I think it got to the level. And then what happened, everything kind of got backed up down there, right? That water clarity just went to like 2 feet, and there was a bunch of crud in the water, right? So that day when I went out there, that ended up being a really good day. What I ended up doing was getting right next to the walls. I felt like those fish were out of the big body, and I could reach over and touch a wall, right? I was pretty close to the wall, even though it was still, I don't know, 80 feet deep where we're at, and we were targeting them. They were all tucked up, like about 60 feet, which was crazy because earlier in that day, I'm marking them down 120, 150, and I'll chase them all the way down there. Generally, I don't like to chase them that deep. If I can find some shallower ones, I'll target those. But yeah, I'll tuck up. If the water clarity gets bad and those fish, there's debris coming down, from those rivers and stuff like that. Check out the sides, get into the shallower water. If they do go to the bottom, that lake in some areas is close to 300 feet deep. Yeah. I'm not throwing my stuff down there. I've lost a downrigger down there before. It's pretty jagged down there. So I usually don't drag my gear down at Billy Chinook. Generally, if I'm Billy Chinook, I'm fishing suspended, or if I do want to go to the bottom, I'm jigging. But I'm not going to take my downriggers at the bottom at Billy Chinook. It is pretty rocky down there, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you change out your hooks on any of your lures?
Make them larger or put larger.
Yeah, every once in a while. So, as far as like brads, I'll go between like 2/0 and 3/0. I've been using the Big River Gamakatsu ones lately. I just feel like that hookup ratio from those has been really good. I've ran smaller stuff too. I'll run down to even, I think I was running some 1s and stuff like that. But yeah, I'll play with hook size, again, depending on lure size a little bit. But again, I've caught them on kokanee gear out there too. That's the other fun thing. You could throw out a little hoochie and a thing and get a bull trout on it. That makes it a fun day, right? Which brings me to another thing too. When you're out there, keep your eyes on the water. I can't tell you how many times I've seen kokanee surfacing, and yeah, they might be surfacing for whatever reason, but generally they're getting chased, right? So I might pull one right off the downer real quick, and I've got a plug rod already ready to go, and I'll send that thing out real quick. No lead, no nothing, run it right on the surface, and it'll get smacked right off the bat. Because those plugs are diving, I think the mag lifts dive anywhere from like 7 to 14 feet or so, roughly in there. If I want to run a little shallower, even closer, I'll run a quick fish. They don't dive quite as deep. I think they're more in the 5 range, but yeah, I'll have a rod that I'm not using just loaded ready when I see that happen. It might be at the end of the day or that early morning. I'll throw up real quick and pull one off and send it back just if I'm going through that area. I'll churn a lot, like everybody, you churn a lot. Don't drive in a straight line. When you churn, those lures are going to shift. They're going to do different things. It might just catch that one fish and look appealing to him. So, yeah.
Sean, typically at the cove, how far out do you run your line before you
Uh,
run your downrigger?
Yeah, so 35, 40 feet is generally my general setback. And then I go down to whatever depth. I'll generally run one at 40, say on the right side of the boat for my deepest rod. My next one up, I might run 60 back, right? So now those are staggered, and I might have them 10 feet apart. And then this rod on my right, again, shifting back, that one was going to be maybe 20 feet from the rod depth there. Because I'm keeping an old bunch. They're fairly close. So the 2 on the right will be 20-foot spread, and the 2 on the left will be 20-foot spread. And there'll be different setbacks. So anywhere from 40 to 60 or vice versa. I usually...
Stay above where you're marking? Or
yeah, so if I am marking them, I'll generally run just right above them. like 5 feet. I'll run right through them too. You know. Yeah, and if I'm marking like large kokanee schools, I might take my 4 rods, and those large kokanee schools might be like 40 feet wide in the water column, right? So I'm running from the bottom of that school I just saw to the top of that school and have those 4 lines spread out through that school. And I'll kind of just run that, and then as I start picking up my pattern for the day and my colors and start honing it down, right, I might move those 4 down deeper in the water column and just kind of move those 4 rods based on where that active one is until that active rod is those middle rods of my 40 feet or my 60 feet that I'm targeting. So
you talk about your Dipsy Divers. What's the effective range for those?
So like these big ones here, if I remember right, they'll get down to 100 feet.
Do you actually use them that deep?
Yeah, I'll run these, 200 feet out behind the boat. You got to put a lot of line out to get down there. But yeah, days that are cold and have, a bunch of people in the boat that have dual rods, I'm going to use those dual rod licenses. We're going to put some more rods. I'll spreading it out. You don't want a bunch of gear in one area, but that's what those are good for. And I'll generally run them deep because I'm running 4 downriggers, but I will generally run these in that 60 to 70, target range. You do lose some depth when you crank the lead out to one side, right? So these move. If I crank it to this side versus having it diving straight behind the boat, they're going to get a lot deeper versus that. But they still get down there quite a ways, and you get the release. It's a lot better than reeling in a 16-ounce lead, and it gets you away from the boat. It gives you a wider spread.
How about that smaller one?
A smaller one, yeah, I use these too. If I'm in shallower water, I use these a lot at Odell. If I'm in shallower water, and again, I'm trying to get all my gear on the bottom, I'll have, setbacks from the downriggers that are close. Then I might have my Dipsy Divers, and then I might have my lead lines. So I'm all fairly close to that, say 20, 30 feet, but all my gear is kind of spread out. Does that make sense?
Would you use it at compass?
Yeah, this can be any application. I've used these for kokanee as well. Maybe they're shallow in the water early in the season, and you want to get it a little bit away from the boat so all your stuff is there. If your boat scares them off, they're going to be to the left or the right. So these are great. I've had great days. I have planer boards. I usually don't run them just because a lot of those lakes you're running pretty tight to people, and it's not very nice to run a board 50 yards to your right or left when you're in a narrow canyon with a bunch of boats trolling around. But I've had some days where I'm like the only person out there, and I'll run them. So, but yeah. 5 minutes. Okay, so we got 5 minutes, so yeah.
So they have the Dodger with the holes at the top. I can't remember the names of them.
Yeah, the Max lure, I think they are. Yeah, and they kick. You can have them kick left or right to the boat.
Right.
Yep.
Do those work at all? Do they actually get out there?
Yeah, you can get the bigger ones. I don't think they're gonna pull your gear away. Where like those will actually, you'll see it in that first few minutes before you can't see it. You'll see it actually just dragging away from the boat, almost like a side planer. But yeah, so.
You didn't mention when you're talking about the lures, Lyman's or J plugs. Do you ever use those?
I do. I have a couple. I have some big. I got big plugs. I have some like tuna size or like popper plugs that I'll run too every once in a while. If I'm experimenting, I'm running fast, and I want to run something maybe in with my spoons that needs to be trolled very fast, I might run some of those with it. But yeah, they would only be at a small time of the year when I am running those. If I'm running slow, I'm running bait or spin fish or brads. That's generally what I'm looking at for my slower speed trollings. So, yeah. Up. All right.